The pond and stream systems that I built a few years ago are maturing nicely. The lower pond is filtered by a bog filter that I built into the stream that feeds the pond. The filter is in this section here. There's plenty of marginal plants and some water fringe in the pebble that makes the top layer of the filter. There's also some filamentous algae, string algae, hair algae, whatever you want to call it. There's thousands of different algae types, and we just tend to give these common names to this clumpy, stringy algae that's very common in ponds. I thought it gave me a good opportunity to talk about the benefits of algae in regard to filtering water, how it helps keep your water crystal clear and healthy. If you don't already know me, my name is Kev, and the aim of my channel is to help people build and maintain a pond without spending a fortune. And if that sounds like something that interests you, you might like to subscribe and check out my website, Ozponds.com. When algae appears in our ponds, we know how ugly it is. I mean, this looks terrible, whereas this is much nicer. But it is useful, and if we understand the role algae plays in filtering the water, then we can be more tolerant, patient, and find more naturalistic ways to combat it. So let's quickly look at some of the benefits of algae. Algae is a photosynthetic organism. That's a fancy way to say it uses light to create energy that it can use to grow. Same like plants. However, algae is not a true plant. It's also not a bacteria or fungi. Algae are their own unique organisms. Algae produces oxygen, and it's been estimated that phytoplankton, which includes various types of algae like diatoms, contribute anywhere from 50 to 80% of the Earth's oxygen supply, and that's pretty bloody important. In our ponds, if we treat algae with algicides, or we manually remove a heap of it all at once, we must be careful that we don't cause an oxygen crash. The algae has grown over time, and the inhabitants from bacteria to fish have become reliant on the oxygen it produces. And this is why aeration and water movement is so useful, as it helps oxygen and air mix. Every living thing needs oxygen, even the things living in water. Algae is incredibly effective at absorbing nitrogen and phosphorus. Nitrogen cycling happens in all water bodies, and it's really important to provide a safe habitat for life. Phosphorus is basically a fertilizer, and algae is excellent at consuming it. Certain algae species can absorb heavy metals, thus removing them from the water. Algae can break down pollutants and toxins in contaminated water, and that's why it's often used in wastewater treatment. Algae is completely natural, and it will react almost instantly to problems within the water. Lots of big commercial aquariums will purposely grow algae as part of their filtration. Some reef keepers add a refugium, which is a little compartment that grows algae to absorb nutrients from the water. Algae is a low-cost filter media, as all it needs is light and nutrients. If its needs are met, it will grow. It can then be harvested and used as a fertilizer, compost, or even food for livestock. Algae is incredibly diverse, and it will grow in every climate. Algae can also trap fine sediments, much like sponges that we add to our aquarium or pond filters. So as you can see, algae has tons of benefits, but if we don't want it in our ponds, what can we do? We can encourage bacteria that competes with algae for the same nutrients. Diversity is the key, and we want lots of different strains of bacteria. Kinda like we know that the gut microbiome needs diversity, or a share portfolio needs diversity, or an ecosystem needs diversity. Everything needs diversity. And bacteria diversity comes with time. You can also inoculate the pond with various strains in a bottle or a powder form, or you could collect water, rocks or plants from healthy waterways that already have these bacteria. The bacteria need food, so we don't want to overclean the pond and reset the process. And I understand that sometimes there's no option. You just need to remember that it will take time for the pond to re-establish itself. after a thorough cleaning. You can also manually remove the algae. Just remember, if the outbreak is massive, you need to make sure that there's plenty of oxygen in the water or that the pond isn't overstocked with fish. And speaking of fish, if you have lots of algae and you're still feeding your fish, you probably should stop. Fish food's just adding more nutrient and the fish will consume algae. Well, at least some will. And even if your fish are carnivores, there's other critters that will be feeding on the algae and then the fish will feed on them. Overstocked ponds are going to produce lots of nitrogen, even with good filtration. And as we know, algae loves nitrogen. You can use plants to help consume nitrogen and phosphorus that is feeding the algae. Plants will take longer to react than algae, so even if you have lots of plants, there's still going to be times of the year when the algae might get the upper hand. You might also like to encourage algae that you find more desirable, such as diatoms. Products like new algae and diatomics can do this. For me, the best thing is good filtration. I like bog filters as they utilise plants, bacteria, and they capture sediment in a natural way, and they can be blended into the landscape. If the algae gets a little too thick, I can remove some, throw it on the garden, or feed it to the chickens. Algae is very important to Earth, and it's important to our ponds. And I don't want a sterile pond or a sterile Earth. I want to get dirty, I want to build immunity, and I want my ponds to be resilient, and some algae allows that to happen. And for the most part, I think my ponds look quite nice and natural. If you'd like to learn how I build my filters and ponds without spending a fortune, you might like to check out my downloadable PDF over on ozponds.com. But anyway, I hope my waffle on about algae was helpful. If you thought so, feel free to give the thumbs up button a wee tickle. Thanks for watching. See ya.